The road stretched wide and empty under the fading light of the alien sky. A single rider moved slowly across the dusty ground, his horse tired but steady. The man's clothes were worn, his boots covered in dust, and his eyes sharp from long travel. He had been alone for many days, hearing only the sound of hooves and wind. The silence felt heavy, as if the land itself was watching him. He tightened his grip on the reins, scanning the horizon. The world here was strange, with broken rocks shaped like towers and plants that glowed faintly in the dark. Every shadow looked alive, and every gust of wind sounded like whispers. Still, he pressed on, for he had no home left behind and no welcome waiting ahead. The horse was all he owned, his only companion and his only way to survive. As night drew near, the air grew colder. He thought of stopping to rest, but something in his gut told him not to. It was the kind of silence that felt dangerous, the kind that comes before something happens. He pulled his cloak tighter and urged his horse forward. Then he saw her. At first, it was only a small shape on the side of the road. Half hidden by tall grass, his hand went to the knife at his belt, ready for trouble. But as he came closer, his breath caught. It was not a trap, not a thief waiting in the dark. It was a girl. She was small, thin, and strange in ways that marked her as alien. Her skin shimmered faintly like pale silver, and her hair was tangled and dark. Her clothes were torn, and one leg was covered in blood. She lay curled up, breathing weakly, her glowing eyes half open and filled with fear. The man slowed his horse, staring at her, unsure of what to do. He had seen aliens before, in markets and in towns. Some were treated as equals, others as slaves. He knew enough to understand that helping her could bring danger. If she was hurt, then someone had hurt her, and that someone might still be near. He looked down at her small, trembling form, then at his horse, then back at the empty road. For a moment, he thought about leaving. Her it would be safer, easier, and no one would ever know. But her glowing eyes caught his, and in that moment he felt something sharp in his chest. It was not pity. It was something heavier, something that told him he could not walk away. The horse stamped its foot, uneasy. The man slid down from the saddle, his boots crunching softly on the dirt. He moved closer, slow and careful. Holding one hand out, the girl flinched, pressing herself back into the grass. Her lips moved, but no sound came. She was too weak to speak, too weak to run. He crouched beside her, his shadow falling over her small form. The wound on her leg looked bad, deep and raw. Blood stained the ground beneath her, and the cold night was stealing her strength. If she stayed here, she would die before morning. The man sighed, his hand tightening on his knee. He knew the choice he had to make. Easy, now, he whispered, though he knew she might not understand. Still, his voice was calm, steady, a promise of no harm. He slid his arms under her gently, and she gasped, her body tense and shaking. But when he lifted her, she was too weak to fight. She clung to his shirt without meaning to, her small hands trembling. The man carried her to the horse, his mind racing. If he put her on the saddle, he would have to walk beside them. The horse was tired already, and the road ahead was long, but leaving her behind was not an option anymore. He set her carefully on the horse, holding her steady. As she swayed, her glowing eyes fluttered shut, and a faint sound escaped her lips, a broken whisper. He could not understand the word, but it sounded like safe. The man's jaw tightened as he looked into the distance. The sky had turned darker, and somewhere far away, a strange howl echoed. It was not the cry of an animal he knew, but it was closer than he liked. The girl shivered at the sound, her weak hand clutching at his sleeve. She was afraid, and now so was he. The man began walking, pulling the horse forward. Each step felt heavier than the last, but his resolve grew stronger. The night was no longer silent. He felt eyes on him, from the rocks, from the dark shapes at the edge of the road. Something was following them, waiting for the right moment. He did not look back. He kept his head high, his knife close, and his steps steady. The girl was his responsibility now, whether he wanted it or not. The road ahead was long and danger was already near, but he knew one thing for certain. This was no longer a lonely road. The night grew colder as the man walked beside his horse. The alien girl rested weakly on the saddle, her silver skin pale under the starlight. Her head leaned against the horse's mane, her breathing slow but uneven. Every so often, she gave a faint shiver, as if the cold was pulling her deeper into the dark. The man glanced at her often, his jaw tight. Her wound was worse than he first thought, and the blood had soaked into the torn cloth around her leg. He had no medicine, no bandages, nothing but his own will to keep her alive. He thought about stopping, but the howls in the distance reminded him it was too dangerous. The hunters, whoever they were still out there. The horse walked slow, tired from the long road. The man placed a steadying hand on the girl's shoulder, making sure she did not fall. She stirred faintly, her glowing eyes half opening. She looked at him, confusion mixed with fear. Her lips parted and she tried to speak, only one broken word escaped. No, he frowned, not understanding. Her small hands gripped the edge of the saddle, as if she wanted to push herself away from him. She was too weak to resist, but her fear was clear. The man felt the weight of her mistrust. Yet he also felt the immense weight of the choice before him. He could leave her here. He could walk away and save his strength, save his horse, save his own life. But even as the thought passed through his mind, he knew it was a lie. If he left her, she would die, and that death would live on his conscience forever. His heart was not made for such abandonment. He let out a slow breath and looked at the girl again. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dark, fragile yet filled with a quiet fire. It was strange. She was nothing like him, not even close. Yet in her trembling form he saw something familiar. Loneliness, pain, and a silent plea for help. He had once carried the same look in his own eyes, many years ago. The man stopped the horse, kneeling down. To check her wound again, he tore a strip from his cloak and pressed it against her leg. The girl winced, gasping softly, but she did not pull away this time. Her gaze softened, and she watched him with wide, uncertain eyes. He worked quickly, binding the cloth tight, hoping it would slow the bleeding. It was not much, but it was all he could do. When he finished, he rose and looked out across the dark horizon. The road split ahead. One path led toward the mountains, a harder but hidden way. The other path ran across the open plains, faster but more dangerous. He had to decide quickly, for the sound of pursuit was closer now. Shadows moved along the ridges, flickering in the starlight. The girl made a sound, weak but urgent. She lifted one trembling hand and pointed toward the mountains. Her voice cracked as she whispered a single word. Safe. The man stared at her, surprised she could speak at all. He studied her glowing eyes and realized she was guiding him. She wanted him to trust her, even though she did not trust him fully. He nodded slowly, pulling the reins. The horse turned toward the mountain path, hooves crunching on the rocky ground. The climb would be hard, but if she believed safety lay there, he would follow. Step by step, they moved upward, leaving the open plains behind. The air grew colder, sharper, and the rocks cast long shadows under the moonlight. Behind them, the hunters gave a cry. The sound echoed through the valley like the call of wolves. The girl flinched, clutching at the saddle, her eyes wide with terror. The man reached up, steadying her again, his own heart pounding. They were being tracked, and he knew the hunters would not give up easily. He pressed forward, guiding the horse carefully up the steep path. Every stone felt like it might slip. Every sound carried too far. The girl's breathing grew heavy, her strength fading, but she held on, whispering words in her language that he could not understand. Her tone, however, was clear. It was a plea, a prayer, a desperate hope. At last they reached a narrow ledge, the horse trembling with exhaustion. The man stopped and looked back down. In the distance, torches burned like fireflies, moving in a slow circle. The hunters were spreading out, searching the valley floor. It would not take long before they followed the trail upward. The man tightened his grip on his knife. He could not fight them all. He knew that much. But he also knew he could not give up, not after choosing to save her. He looked at the girl, again her glowing eyes meeting his. In that moment, something shifted between them. Not trust, not yet, but a fragile thread of connection. The horse gave a low sound of protest, tired and weary. The man stroked its neck, whispering soft words of comfort. The choice had been made. He would not abandon the girl, not even if it cost him his life, and with that, he pushed forward again, leading them higher into the shadows of the mountains. Somewhere behind them, a horn blew, deep and chilling. The hunters had found the trail. The girl trembled, her glowing eyes filled with dread. The man only gritted his teeth and kept walking, for he had made his choice, and there was no turning back. The mountain path twisted like a snake, narrow and sharp. The man led his horse carefully, one hand steady on the reins, the other resting near his knife. The alien girl lay weak on the saddle, her silver skin pale, her glowing eyes half closed. Her breath came in soft, shallow gasps, and every step made her tremble. Yet she held on, clinging to the saddle as if her life depended on it. The night around them was restless. Wind cut through the rocks with a hollow whistle, carrying the scent of smoke and dust. Somewhere far below, the hunters' torches still moved, tiny sparks of fire in the valley. Their cries echoed faintly, carried up the mountain like whispers of doom. The man's heart beat harder, each sound pressing on his mind like a warning. He glanced back at the girl, her lips moving faintly. She whispered something in her own tongue, words soft and broken. Though he could not understand, her tone was clear. It was fear. Her glowing eyes flicked toward the darkness behind them and then to the rocks above. The man understood enough. Danger was not only behind, it was all around. The horse stumbled slightly, its hooves striking loose stones that clattered down the slope. The sound echoed too loudly, too sharp. The man froze, listening. From the shadows, another sound answered. Quiet footsteps, moving with patience. Not the hooves of animals. Not the wind, but something living, something following. The girl stirred weakly, lifting her head. Her glowing eyes widened as she stared at the rocks above them. She raised one trembling hand, pointing into the darkness. Her lips shaped one word, broken but clear. Sisters. The man frowned, confused. Was she asking for them or warning about them? Before he could ask, a shape moved in the darkness. A tall shadow shifted on the ridge above, watching. The man tightened his grip on the reins, pulling the horse. Close to the cliff wall, another shadow appeared on the opposite side, then another, silent, patient, waiting. He felt the weight of unseen eyes pressing on him. The hunters had not only followed them from below, they had climbed ahead. The man's breath quickened. His knife felt too small, his strength too thin. Yet he stood firm, keeping his body. Between the girl and the shadows, the girl clutched his sleeve, her small voice trembling. She tried to speak, forming words slowly, as if each one cost her strength. Danger. Wait, she whispered. Her eyes glowed brighter now, almost feverish. The man nodded once, his jaw tight. He did not need translation to understand. The hunters were laying a trap. The wind shifted, carrying a new sound. A faint clatter of metal, a low murmur of voices. Then silence, too perfect, too complete. The kind of silence that came before violence. The man's skin prickled with unease. He knew they were surrounded. He pulled the horse to a stop, the beast trembling under his touch. His eyes scanned the shadows, searching for movement. He forced his voice calm, speaking low to the girl. Hold on, whatever happens, don't let go, he whispered. Her fingers tightened on his sleeve, weak but determined. Then from the rocks above, a figure dropped silently to the path. Tall, lean, its face hidden by cloth, its eyes burning faintly red. In the night it carried a spear tipped with bone, sharp and glistening. More shadows followed. Stepping out of the darkness with cruel patience, the hunters had arrived, silent no longer. The man stepped forward, knife in hand. His body blocked the girl from view. The hunters hissed in their strange tongue, laughing low. One pointed at the girl, their voices mocking. The words he could not understand, but the meaning was clear. They wanted her. They would take her, and they would kill him. The girl let out a weak cry, shrinking back, her glowing eyes filled with terror. She pressed her small hands against the saddle as if trying to disappear. The man's grip tightened on the knife. Fear pulsed through his veins, but he stood his ground. He had made his choice already. He would not abandon her. The hunters moved closer, circling like wolves. Their spears glimmered faintly under the moonlight. The horse stamped its hooves nervously, trapped between fear and obedience. The girl whispered again, her voice so faint it was almost lost. "Safe, Dawn. Sisters," she breathed. Her words were broken, but her eyes shone with a strange light. The man stared at her, trying to understand. Dawn. Sisters? What did she mean? Was she hoping her kin would come? Or was she telling him that only the morning could save them? The thought burned in his mind, filling him with grim resolve. The hunters crept closer, their spears raised. The man's heart pounded. He knew he could not win against so many, but he also knew one thing. He could buy time, if Dawn was there. Hope? Then he would fight until the sun rose, no matter the cost. He spread his stance, knife ready, eyes fixed on the nearest hunter. The girl clung to the saddle, her glowing gaze locked on him. The night held its breath, shadows pressing in, danger at every side, and in that moment the lonely road became a battlefield, a place where one man's choice would be tested by the darkness itself. The mountain wind cut sharper now, carrying with it the hiss of hunters' voices. The man held his knife steady, the blade small compared to the spears glinting in the torchlight. The alien girl clung weakly to the horse's mane, her glowing eyes filled with fear. She whispered again, her broken voice trembling. Dawn. Safe. Sisters. But dawn was still far and the hunters were already closing in. The horse stamped nervously, its muscles trembling from exhaustion. The man placed one hand on its neck, calming it even as his own pulse raced. This horse was his life. His only ride. The one companion that had carried him across endless miles. But as he looked at the girl, pale and fragile, he knew what must be done. A choice had to be made, and it would cut deep. The first hunter lunged, spear flashing toward him. The man swung his knife, deflecting the blow, sparks flying as bone met steel. The horse reared, neighing in fear, almost throwing the girl from the saddle. The man caught her quickly, pushing her back against the saddle with one hand while keeping the knife up with the other. Another spear came, slicing his arm, and he hissed in pain but did not falter. The hunters laughed, their voices cruel. They thought him weak, thought him foolish for standing in their way, but their laughter only hardened his will. He stepped forward, slashing at the nearest one, forcing them back for a moment. The girl cried out faintly, clinging to the saddle with all her strength. The horse was too frightened now, shifting and stumbling on the narrow path. The man realized it could not carry both of them much longer. Every step was dangerous, every movement a risk of falling into the dark valley below. The horse's eyes rolled wide with fear, its chest heaving from exhaustion. It was loyal, but it was at its limit. The man made his choice. He gripped the reins tightly, then untied them from the saddle. The hunters hissed, watching with curiosity as he moved. He pulled the girl gently into his arms, her body light but trembling. Her glowing eyes widened in confusion as he lifted her down. She weakly shook her head, whispering, "No, no." But he ignored it, his jaw set with grim resolve. He placed her against his chest, shifting her weight to his back, her arms, frail but desperate, wrapped around his neck. He whispered low, more to the horse. Then to her, "Go, live." With a sharp slap on its flank, he sent the horse forward. The beast neighed loudly, startled, before galloping down the path and vanishing into the shadows. The girl let out a faint sob, watching the only ride disappear. The man's chest tightened with pain, not from his wounds but from the loss. That horse had been his partner, his friend, his lifeline. But now it was gone, sacrificed for her. The hunters roared with laughter, mocking him. A fool. No escape. One of them sneered in broken human tongue. But the man ignored them, his arms tightening around the girl. He shifted his stance, planting his feet firmly. If they wanted her, they would have to kill him first. The girl buried, her face against his shoulder. He could feel her weak breaths on his neck, her body shivering. She whispered again, words in her own language this time, soft and melodic. Though he could not understand, the tone was clear. Gratitude, sorrow, and something like a promise. Her trembling hands clutched at him as if he was the only thing keeping her alive. The hunters advanced again, spears raised high. The man moved back slowly, step by step, carrying the girl while keeping his knife ready. The path narrowed behind him, leading deeper into the cliffs. The hunters pressed closer, their laughter growing louder, their torches painting the rocks with firelight. The man's muscles burned, his body heavy under the weight, but he would not let go. One hunter lunged too close. The man turned sharply, his knife flashing in the dim light. The blade sank into the hunter's arm, drawing a howl of pain. The others stepped back for a moment, surprised at his ferocity. The man bared his teeth, eyes blazing with defiance. He was not prey, not yet, but his strength was fading, and he knew he could not last forever. The girl lifted her head, glowing eyes shimmering with faint tears. She whispered again, "Sisters, soon," her voice breaking. The man frowned, sweat dripping down his brow. Was she certain they would come? Or was it only hope keeping her alive? The hunters regrouped, circling him like wolves once more. One raised a horn and blew a low, chilling note. The sound echoed through the cliffs, answered by others further away. More were coming. The man's grip on his knife tightened. There would be no escape, not unless Dawn truly brought her sisters. The girl's arms squeezed weakly around him, as if to tell him to hold on, her glowing eyes locked on the sky above, where the first faint hint of gray touched the stars. The man followed her gaze, his breath heavy, his body aching. Perhaps she was right. Perhaps Dawn held something he could not yet see. But until then, he would fight. He had given up his only ride, his only chance of fleeing. All he had left was his will to protect her. And in the silence, after the horn's echo faded, the man whispered one promise to himself. They will not take you, not while I breathe. The man's breath came heavy as he climbed deeper into the rocky path. The alien girl lay weak against his back, her glowing eyes half open, watching every shadow. The night pressed close around them, and the hunters' voices carried on the wind. Their laughter echoed from the cliffs, cruel and certain. They knew their prey was trapped. At last the path narrowed into a flat stretch between two high stone walls. The man stopped, his knife trembling in his grip. He knew before he turned that they had caught him. A glow of fire rose behind, then ahead. Torches flared on both sides. Cutting off escape, the hunters stepped out of the shadows, tall figures with lean frames and sharp faces hidden beneath bone masks. Their spears glinted, their red eyes burned in the darkness. They formed a half circle, tightening around him. With steady steps, the man backed slowly toward the wall, placing his body like a shield between them and the girl. His heart pounded, but his eyes stayed fierce. The leader of the hunters stepped forward, taller than the rest. He raised his spear and tapped it. Against the stone, the sound echoing like a drumbeat. The hunters answered with a low hiss, their voices blending into a sound like snakes in the dark. The girl whimpered softly, pressing her face against the man's shoulder. The leader pointed at her, then at him, his meaning clear, hand her over or die. The man's jaw tightened. His fingers clenched the knife until his knuckles burned white. He had already given up his horse, already given up his chance of escape. He would not give her to them now, not after carrying her this far. He stood taller, eyes locked on the leader, and shook his head once. A ripple of anger ran through the circle. The hunters stepped closer, spears raised, their torches casting long shadows across the rocks. The man felt the girl trembling against him, her small voice whispering, "Dawn, soon. Sisters." But the sky above was still dark. the stars still bright. The sun was not yet near. The first hunter lunged forward, spear flashing. The man twisted, knife slicing across the spear's shaft, splintering wood. The attacker stumbled back with a snarl. The others hissed, moving closer. The circle tightened, their torches swaying like angry stars. The horse's absence weighed on him more than ever. If the beast had still been there, he might have broken through the circle. But now it was only his strength, his knife, and his will to stand. The hunters laughed, mocking his hopeless fight. Their leader raised a hand, and suddenly they all froze. Silence fell heavy, broken only by the crackle of torches. The leader tilted his head, listening to something far away. The man felt it too. A faint vibration under his feet, like the pulse of the earth. The hunters shifted uneasily, their hissing voices lowering. The girl lifted her head slowly, her glowing eyes staring toward the eastern sky. "Soon," she whispered, stronger than before. Her hand clutched his shirt, her weak grip filled with strange certainty. The man frowned, confused, but something in her eyes gave him pause. She believed something was coming, something that would change everything. The hunters felt it too, their circle loosening for just a breath. The leader hissed a command, breaking the hesitation. The circle snapped tight again, spears ready to strike. The man spread his stance, knife steady though his arms ached. The girl pressed her forehead against his neck, her breath hot with fear. He whispered back, his voice low but steady. "Hold on. I'll keep you safe." A hunter charged from the left, spear thrusting for his chest. The man twisted, slashing upward, the knife cutting across the hunter's arm. Blood splattered the stones, and the hunter reeled back with a howl. Another came from the right, spear aimed low. The man kicked out, boot striking the shaft and snapping it in two. For a moment the hunters faltered, surprised by his defiance. But then they laughed again, voices sharp and cruel. One of them hissed words in broken human tongue. "Fool man, she is nothing, worthless." The girl whimpered, her glowing eyes filling with tears. The man snarled back, his voice fierce. "She is mine to protect." The leader raised his spear high. The circle of hunters pressed closer, their shadows swallowing the narrow path. The man's knife shook in his hand, but his resolve did not. If this was where he would fall, then he would fall standing. But in his heart he prayed dawn would come. Then from somewhere deep in the cliffs, a sound rose. It was not the hunter's call, not the cry of beasts. It was a low, humming vibration, powerful and strange. The hunters froze, heads snapping toward the sound, their red eyes narrowing. The girl lifted her face, glowing eyes shining. Brighter than before, her trembling lips shaped one word, soft but full of certainty. "Sisters." The man's breath caught, his eyes darting toward the shadows. The hunters shifted nervously, their circle breaking for the first time. The leader barked a harsh command, trying to steady his pack. But the sound came again, louder now. Closer. The girl clutched tighter to the man's chest. The hunters hesitated, their cruel laughter gone. The man's heart pounded harder, his knife steady once more. Something was coming, something that even the hunters feared. And for the first time that night he felt the faint spark of hope. The air grew heavier as the humming sound spread across the cliffs. The hunters shifted uneasily, their red eyes darting toward the shadows. Their cruel laughter had vanished, replaced with low whispers and nervous hisses. The man stood tall, the alien girl clinging to his back, her glowing eyes fixed on the sky. The sound grew louder, like the earth itself was waking. The leader of the hunters snarled, trying to keep control. He raised his spear and barked commands in their strange tongue, but even his voice shook with unease. The hunters shuffled, torches, wavering, their circle breaking apart. The man gripped his knife tighter, sensing something was about to change. The girl whispered softly, her voice weak but filled with hope. "Dawn. Sisters." Her words carried like a prayer, drifting into the cold air. The man glanced at the horizon. The eastern sky had begun to pale, faint streaks of gray brushing away the night. The hunters noticed too. They hissed and growled, pointing, their spears toward the man and the girl, One of them spat in anger, shouting in broken human words, "No son help you, and she die before light." The girl flinched at the words, but the man only narrowed his eyes. He stepped forward. Knife. Raised, his voice steady. "Try me." The hunters roared in fury, charging as one. The man swung his knife, forcing them back for a moment. His boots scraped against stone as he moved, carrying the girl with every step. The clash of steel and bone filled the pass. Torches dropped. Shadows swirled and sparks flew into the cold air. But then, silence. The hunters froze mid-charge, their heads snapping upward. From the cliffs above, shadows moved. Tall figures stood on the ridge, their outlines sharp against the pale sky. They did not carry torches. They did not speak. They only watched. The man felt the girl stir against his back. Her trembling hand lifted, pointing toward them. Her glowing eyes filled with tears, but her voice grew stronger. "Sisters," she whispered, almost in relief. The man's chest tightened. She had been right all along. The hunters hissed loudly, their formation breaking. Fear flickered in their red eyes as the figures above began to move. They descended silently, their steps swift and graceful. The hunters raised their spears, shouting in panic now. The man stood frozen, unsure if these newcomers were enemies or salvation. The first of the figures reached the path. She was tall, her silver skin shimmering faintly under the dawn light. Her eyes glowed brighter than the girl's, fierce and steady. Her long hair flowed like dark fire, and in her hands she held a blade of bone and steel. She did not speak, but her presence was enough. The hunters stepped back. Then more came, slipping down the rocks with deadly grace. They moved like shadows given form, silent and precise. Each one carried a weapon, spears, blades, and bows strung with bone. Their glowing eyes burned like stars. The hunters snarled and hissed, but their fear was clear. The girl whispered against the man's shoulder, her voice soft. "They came for me." The man's eyes widened as he realized these were her sisters, the ones she had prayed for, the ones who had answered her call. The hunters tried to rally, their leader shouting harsh commands, but the sisters did not wait. With a sudden motion, they struck. Their blades flashed, their movements faster than the eye could follow. The hunters screamed as they were cut down, their spears shattering against the silver women's fury. The man stepped back, shielding the girl from the chaos. The clash was brutal but swift. Every time a hunter tried to rise, a sister's blade sent him falling again. Torches scattered, flames dying against the cold stone. The air filled with the sound of steel, screams, and silence broken again and again. The leader of the hunters roared, charging at the man in desperation. His spear thrust forward, aimed at the girl. The man twisted, knife striking against the shaft, sparks flying. The leader snarled, pushing harder. But before he could land the blow, one of the sisters appeared. Beside him, her blade cut the spear in two with a single strike. The hunter staggered back, his red eyes wide with fear. The sister's glowing gaze locked on him. Sharp and merciless, in one swift motion she ended him. The leader fell, and with him the hunter's spirit broke. The survivors fled into the shadows, their cries fading into the cliffs. The sisters did not chase. They stood still, silent, their glowing eyes fixed on the man. The dawn light grew stronger now, painting the mountains gold. The girl stirred weakly, lifting her head to look at them. One sister stepped forward, kneeling beside the man. Her hand brushed the girl's hair, her fierce eyes softening. The girl whispered something in her own tongue. The sister nodded, her gaze shifting to the man. For a long moment no words were spoken, only silence heavy with meaning. The man's body ached, his knife hung loose in his hand. He had survived, though barely. But more than that, he had kept his promise. The girl was alive, and her sisters had come. He lowered his knife slowly, breathing heavy. The sisters stood in a circle, now tall and silent. Their eyes glowed brighter than the fading torches. They had arrived with the dawn, just as the girl had said, and now the hunters were gone, scattered like shadows before the light. The man realized the night had ended, not only in the sky, but in their fate. The dawn spread slowly across the mountains, painting the jagged cliffs in shades of gold. The man stood still, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths, his knife hanging loose at his side. The hunters were gone, their torches extinguished, their bodies left broken on the stone. Silence returned, but it was not the silence of fear anymore. It was the silence after a storm, a silence that held weight, meaning, and change. Around him the sisters gathered, their tall forms circling him like guardians of old. Their silver skin shimmered. In the morning light, their glowing eyes unblinking, sharp and unreadable. They moved with a grace that felt otherworldly, each step measured, each glance filled with unspoken power. The alien girl clung weakly to the man's back, her small arms wrapped around his neck. Her glowing eyes softened with relief as she looked upon her kin. One of the sisters stepped forward, the tallest, her hair long and dark, her gaze burning with quiet fire. She carried a blade still wet with the blood of hunters, yet her face was calm, almost solemn. She stopped before the man, her eyes locking with his. For a long moment, neither spoke, the dawn light falling between them. Then, she slowly lowered her weapon, pressing its tip against the stone in a gesture of peace. The man shifted slightly, unsure. His muscles ached, his wounds burned, but his stance remained strong. He did not bow, did not lower his eyes. He had given too much to stand. Weak now, the girl whispered faintly, her voice broken but clear. Sister. Safe. Because him. Her words were halting, but her meaning carried like thunder. The tall sister's eyes softened, her gaze shifting to the man again. She reached out one hand and touched the girl's face gently. The girl leaned into the touch, tears shimmering in her glowing eyes. Then the sister turned her hand, and to the man's surprise she touched her fingers to her own chest, a gesture that seemed like thanks. The other sisters moved closer, surrounding them. None spoke a word, yet their silence was louder than any voice. They studied him with glowing eyes, measuring him, judging him. The man felt the weight of their stares, but he did not flinch. He had faced hunters, given up his horse, bled for their kin. He had nothing left to fear. One sister knelt before him, lowering her head. The gesture shocked him. He had expected anger, suspicion, maybe even death. But this was respect, quiet, and profound. Another followed, and another, until all had bowed their heads slightly in silence. The man's chest tightened, his throat dry. The girl whispered again, her weak voice trembling. Brother. The word cut through him, heavy and soft at once. He looked down at her, her glowing eyes filled not with fear anymore but with belonging. It struck him harder than any spear. For so long he had walked the lonely road with nothing but his horse now. Though he had lost it, he had gained something strange and greater. The sisters rose again, forming a protective circle around them. They lifted the girl gently from his back, careful as if holding something sacred. She reached for him even as they carried her, her small hand gripping his sleeve. Her glowing eyes begged him not to step away. The sisters noticed and did not stop her hand. They allowed it. The tallest sister met his eyes once more. She lifted her blade and raised it in salute, the silent gesture of a warrior to another. The meaning was clear. He was no longer seen as an enemy, but as one who had earned his place. The man lowered his knife slowly, nodding once in return. No words were needed, not between them, not here. As the sisters began to move, leading their wounded kin away from the battlefield, the man followed. Each step was heavy, but his heart felt strangely light. The girl's hand still clung to his sleeve, her glowing eyes never leaving him. Her sisters did not stop her, did not pull her away. Instead, they allowed him to walk beside them, as if he belonged. The road ahead was still unknown. He did not know where they would take him, or what they would ask of him. But he knew this. He was no longer walking alone. The sacrifice of his only ride had bound him to something greater, something that whispered of destiny as the sun rose higher. The sisters led him down a hidden path into the mountains. The valley below lay silent now, washed clean by blood and dawn. The man looked once more at the horizon, remembering his horse, remembering the choice he had made. It had cost him dearly, but it had saved her. And through that choice he had found a bond that no road, no battle, no distance could break. The girl leaned against her sisters now, her weak body supported, but her glowing eyes turned back to him, shining with unspoken words. He understood without her speaking. Gratitude, trust, and something more, something that told him his journey was no longer his alone. And as the silent sisters walked beside him, he knew his fate had changed. Forever.